Overview. From coast to interior. The Qing Empire entered the treaty port era as Western industrial firepower imposed a new rulebook. China survived foreign wars and civil upheaval, but central authority fractured. Reform seeds sprouted inside a wounded polity. 1. Opium Wars and the Treaty Port System, 1839 to 1842, 1856 to 1860. Britain plus France forced the treaties of Nanjing 1842 and Tianjin, Beijing 1858 to 1860. More ports opened, fixed low tariffs, extraterritoriality, permanent legations in Beijing, and the cession of Hong Kong. A web of treaty ports emerged, concessions with foreign courts and police. The Imperial Maritime Customs Service foreign run, revenue remitted to Beijing, stabilized income yet eroded sovereignty. 2. The Taiping Civil War. A country on fire, 1852-1864. Hong Shuquan's Taiping Heavenly Kingdom seized Nanjing, pushed radical social edicts, and turned the Yangtze heartland into a battlefield. Casualties reached the tens of millions. Parallel uprisings, Nyon, Muslim revolts, further drained the state and shattered the rural economy. 3. Power outsourced, regional armies, and new dependencies. The court leaned on provincial strongman Zheng Gofan, Zhuo's Hongtang, Li Hongzhanghu raised regional armies Shanghai with local funding and command. Western advisors, rifled arms, artillery, and steamers, for example. The ever-victorious army entered inland wars. In exchange, foreign loans, pledged customs revenue, and deeper diplomatic military entanglement. 4. Seeds of self-strengthening, 1860s, the Tiong Formula, Chinese essence, Western utility, guided practical reforms. Arsenals Fuzhou, Jiangnan, Tianjin, shipyards, translation bureaus, and technical schools. Results were real but patchy. Ships, guns, telegraphs, and a new cohort of technocrats, constrained by thin budgets, court factionalism, and fear of Western contagion. 5. The 1864 balance sheet. Survival with trade-offs, gains. The dynasty kept the throne. A modern revenue spine via customs. Nascent industrial urban hubs, Shanghai, Tianjin. A cadre of reform-minded officials. Losses sliced legal sovereignty in concessions. Military regionalization weakened the center. Moral authority faded as the state relied on treaty structures and foreign credit. 6. Foreshadowing a clash with Japan. The treaty order standardized imperial rules in East Asia. After Meiji 1868, Japan mastered the same toolkit: steel ships, tariff diplomacy, treaty leverage. As Tokyo looked to Korea and Manchuria, China, fresh from civil war and only half reformed, faced a smaller neighbor that had modernized systemically. The peninsula would be the fuse. Close. In 1864 the guns around Nanjing fell silent, but the grammar of power had changed. Steam and steel treaties and consular courts, customs and credit would frame every later choice and set the stage for the Sino-Japanese confrontations that followed. Quick take. Forced open by U.S. black ships 185354, Japan toppled the Tokugawa shogunate 1868 and launched the Meiji Restoration, centralizing power, conscripting a national army, reforming taxes, education, currency, and industrializing at speed. By crushing the Satsuma Rebellion 1877, the new state proved it could wield modern force, ready to project power toward Korea and Manchuria, setting up future clashes with China. 1. A door forced open, an old order totters 1853 to 1867, 1853 to 1854. Commodore Perry compels treaty ports and low tariffs. Sanjay Revere, the emperor, expelled the barbarians, collides with commercial pragmatism. Legitimacy of the Tokugawa regime erodes. Domains split between hardline nativists and cautious reformers. 2. 1868 Fukoku, Kyohei, rich country, strong army. Meiji Restoration, 1868. Shogunate abolished. Imperial rule restored. Charter oath, pledged to seek knowledge worldwide and renovate institutions. 1871. Hon-2-Ken- domains abolished, replaced by prefectures, taxation, policing, and conscription centralized. 3. Building the modern state. Fast military. Conscription law 1873. Army on a Prussian template, navy on a British model. Finance and money. New currency in 1871. A national banking system. Land tax reform 1873 stabilizes revenue. Education and infrastructure. Education Code 1872, mass primary schooling. Tokyo-Yokohama Railway 1872, telegraph network. Military technical academies. Industry, state shipyards. Yokozuka, Nagasaki, Osaka, spinning mills. Emergence of Zaibotsu, Mitsui, Mitsubishi, aligned with national strategy. Learning from the West, Iwakura Mission 1871-73. Benchmarks, institutions, technology, and codifies. A reform roadmap. For trial by blood. The end of the samurai era. Satsuma Rebellion 1877. Former samurai rise under Seigo Takamori. The conscript army wins, validating Meiji, centralization and permanently subordinating the warrior class to the state. 5. Strategic consequences linking to China. Japan now wields the state capacity, plus military power, plus fiscal base to pursue a perimeter of security, the line of advantage. Yamagata, Korea becomes the hinge of security. Manchuria, the resource belt. The stage is set for the First Sino-Japanese War, 1894-1895, and later expansion on the continent. Milestones, 1853-54 Perry, 1868 Meiji Restoration, 1871 Domains abolished, yen issued, 1872 Education Code, First Railway, 1873 Conscription, Land Tax Reform, 1877 Satsuma. Key figures: Emperor Meiji, Ichirobumi, Yakubo, Toshimichi, Yamagata, Eritomo, Seigo Takamori. Visual cues: black ships in Edo Bay, First Railway, shipyards and textile mills, conscripts drilling. A map with arrows from Japan toward Korea, Manchuria line of advantage. Quick take: after surviving foreign invasions and civil wars, the Qing state pursued self-strengthening, importing Western technology to defend Confucian governance. Arsenals and shipyards rose, telegraphs and factories spread, and the Beiyang Navy became China's steel showpiece. Yet reforms were regional, piecemeal, and underfunded. By the 1890s, China owned big ships but lacked the integrated system to fight a modern war, especially against a centralized Magira Japan. 1. From survival to reform. Tiong. Ideology. Tiong Chinese essence, Western utility. Keep the Confucian state. Borrow Western tools. Key reformers: Zheng Fan, Zhuo Zongtang, Li Hongjiang, later Zhongyi. Political reality. The court with Empress Dowager Cixi allowed pragmatic, localized projects enough to stabilize, to narrow, to transform. 2. Industrial spine, coastal muscle arsenals and shipyards. Jiangnan, Shanghai, Fuzhou, Tianjin cast cannon, built steamers, naval schools, translated gunnery and navigation manuals. Infrastructure, telegraph lines, lighthouse service, limited rail experiments. A new engineering translator cohort emerged. Official merchant ventures, China merchants, steam, navigation, shipping. Kaiping coal mines. Li Hongjiang fused state goals with coastal capital to fund modernization. 3. The Beiyang Navy pride with hairline cracks, built around German-made ironclads, Dingyuan and genuine, plus cruisers, Juan, Jingyuan, Chaoyong, etc. Bases and forts. Port Arthur, Lushan and Wei Highway as twin anchors. Daegu, forts upgraded. Northern Fleet touted as Asia's strongest on paper. Training and logistics. Periodic blue water cruises and gunnery, but ammunition expensive. Practice limited. Dockyard repair capacity lagged. Key spares and refits still foreign dependent. 4. Fragmentation by design. 3 navies, few joints. Beiyang, Nanyang, Fujian fleets answered to different patrons. No unified admiralty, strategy, or standard procurement. Budget politics. Naval appropriations erratic. Prestige purchases beat long-term maintenance. Coastal defense vied with court expenditures and provincial needs. Command culture, merit, and modern drill coexisted with seniority, faction, and ceremonial routines, good for parades, bad for sustained combat. 5. The Sino-French stress test 1884-85. War with France over Vietnam exposed coordination gaps. The Fuzhou fleet was annihilated at Mayway. Northern heavy units stayed mostly idle to deter Japan, Russia. Lesson learned, half applied. Coastal forts mattered. Dispersed fleets without joint command did not. 6 1890s. Capability without cohesion industry grew, but capital goods, steel, and cordite supply chains remained shallow. Officers trained, yet doctrine, logistics, and inter-service planning trailed procurement. Meanwhile, Meiji Japan standardized everything: budgets, staff work, drills, converting growth into systemic power. Milestones: 1860s arsenals founded, 1870s, telegraph, shipping companies, early 1880s Beiyang, heavy units acquired, 1884 to 85 Sino-French War, 1892-93 fleet, at peak on paper. Key figures: Li Hongzhang, Zhong Shidong, Empress Dowager, 6E visual cues, ironclads at anchor, gunnery tables in translation, twin bases way highway, Lushan on a map, ledger lines showing purchase versus maintenance, foreshadow, with fleets commissioned but institutions unfinished. China approached the Korean crisis of 1894, holding impressive ships yet lacking the integrated planning, ammo stocks, and joint command that turned ships into victory. Next, Korea as the hinge. Quick take: between China and Japan, Korea Hosan became the lever that would pry open war. Both powers embedded advisors, troops, and commercial ties. The Lituate Convention, Tientsin, 1885, tried to freeze a balance on a Hertrigger. Social crisis then exploded into the Donghak Peasant War, 1894. China sent troops at Seoul's request and notified Japan as agreed. Tokyo landed its own forces, seized the palace, and demanded sweeping reforms. Diplomacy collapsed. By late July 1894, shots at Pungdo and Seongguan turned the Korean standoff into the First Sino-Japanese War. 1. Managing a dangerous balance. Post-1882, Chinese footprint. Resident Yuan Shikai advised court and commanded drill units. Merchants and contracts tightened Qing influence. Japanese footprint. Trainers reformed Korean troops. Loans, merchants, and postal telegraph links built leverage. Li Tuetinzin, 1885. Both sides withdraw troops. Must notify before redeploying. Stability by mutual surveillance to coups, countercups, and bad blood. Imo, mutiny, 1882. Anti-reform soldiers riot. Chinese forces restore order, gives bigger Qing role in Seoul. Gaps in coup, 1884. Japan-leaning reformers attempt a 3-day revolution. Chinese troops crush it, gives Tokyo vows not to be outmaneuvered again. 3. Reform versus suzerainty, competing blueprints. Qing, gradual reform under suzerain protection, versus Japanese Gabo-style overhaul under Japanese palace factions, queen's kin, conservatives, reformers, invite outside backing. Every reshuffle feels like proxy escalation. 4. Social powder keg, Donghuk, 1894. Tax abuses, local corruption, crop distress, gives Donghuk peasant armies erupt in Jeolla. Korea requests Chinese troops to stabilize the south. Beijing notifies Tokyo. Japan lands forces near Kemyulpo, Incheon, then seizes Gyeongbokgung to force cabinet change, and Gabo reforms a decisive gamble. 5. Negotiations unravel, gives guns, speak Li Hongzhang versus its Hirobumi. Proposals for limited stabilization versus Japanese insistence on sweeping institutional changes and Chinese withdrawal, while envoys trade notes, field commander's position, Chinese at a Japanese, moving from Kemyulpo Seoul, the 25th of July, 1894. Battle off Pungdo, Japanese. Cruisers intercept Chinese transports, escorts near Kemyulpo, gives de facto start of hostilities at sea. The 28th to the 29th of July, Sinwon, Asan. Japanese forces defeat Chinese detachment, gives Korean theater tilts to Tokyo. 6. Why the peninsula mattered. For China, suzerain prestige, buffer shielding, Liaodong, Manchuria, and maritime access north of the Yellow Sea. For Japan, Yamagata's line of advantage, keep rivals off the home islands. Korea, a shield or dagger if hostile. Logistics decide, ports Kumulpo, Busan, roads to Seoul, Pyongyang, and control of telegraphs, depots, shape operational tempo. 7. The fuse reaches the powder. By August 1894, the notification mechanism of Tientsin had become permission for parallel invasions. With Korea effectively under Japanese control and Chinese columns falling back toward Pyongyang, the conflict leaps beyond the peninsula toward the Yalu, Yellow Sea, and later Lushan. Milestones: 1882, Imo, Mutiny. 1884, Gapson Coup. 1885, Litwit Jensen, Convention, Spring-Summer. 1894, Donghok Duel Interventions. The 25th of July, 1894, Pungu. 28-29 Jul Songguan. Atao, Asan. Key figures: Yuan Shikai, Li Hongzhang, Ithirabumi, Yamagata, Eritomo. Korean court factions: King Gejong, Queen Min. Visual cues: split-screen map with Chinese-Japanese arrows into Korea. Telegram overlays notified Pert Yensin. Palace seizure at Gyeongbuk-hung. Naval silhouettes off Kamu. Quick take: the Korean crisis became a showdown between a centralized Majira war machine and a fragmented Qing system. Japan won decisively on land and sea. The Treaty of Shimonoseki, April 17, 1895, redrew Northeast Asia, humiliating China and turbocharging Japan's rise. 1. Opening moves gives Korea falls to Japan. The 25th of July, 1894, Pungdo off Kamelpo, Incheon. Japanese cruisers intercept Chinese transports de facto, start of hostilities at sea. The 28th to the 29th of July, Seong-1, Asan Chinese detachment, defeated. Japanese secure the Solason axis. The 15th of September, Pyongyang, Japan wins a set-piece land battle. Chinese forces retreat toward the Yalu to command of the sea. The Yalu Yellow Sea, the 17th of September, 1894. The Beiyang fleet fields 2 heavy German-built ironclads Dingyuan, Genuine, and mixed cruisers. Japan brings fast cruisers with quick-firing guns and better gunnery control. Outcome: tactical Japanese victory. Chinese cruisers burn, sink. Ironclads survive, but are isolated. Japan gains operational freedom to land and supply armies along the Liaodong coast. 3. Manchuria, Liaodong, Port Arthur. October-November, 1894. Japanese cross the Yalu, drive into southern Manchuria, seize Jinzhou and the Liaodong Peninsula. Port Arthur, Lushan Falls, late Nov. Loss of the northern naval base shocks China. Reports of atrocities stain the victory's memory, but do not slow Japan's advance. 4. Breaking the Northern Shield, Wei Highway Jan, February 1895. Japan turns across the Bahai to Wei Highway, the Beiyang fleet's remaining refuge, attacking from land and sea. Winter crossings over ice. February 1895. Chinese defenses collapse. Admiral Ding Ruchang dies by suicide. The Beiyang fleet is destroyed. Surrenders. China loses sea control. 5. The Last Lever, Pescadores, and Taiwan Mar, 1895. Japan takes the Pescadores Pinghu, choking approaches to Taiwan. Maritime pressure plus collapsing northern fronts push Beijing to sue for peace. 6. Treaty of Shimonoseki, April 17, 1895. Korea's full independence. Recognized. Removing Qing suzerainty. Japan will later pivot to protectorate. Annexation. Cessions: Taiwan and the Pescadores to Japan. Liaodong Peninsula to Japan. Provisionally. Indemnity: 200 million taels, silver. New treaty ports and industrial rights factories. Navigation. MFN. Shimonoseki Incident. A Japanese nationalist wounds Li Hongzhen ironically, softening some terms. 7. Triple Intervention, April 23, 1895. Russia, Germany, France force Japan to return Liaodong, arguing it threatens Beijing in exchange for more indemnity. Result: Japan feels robbed of fruits of victory, gives resentment toward Russia. Soon after, Russia leases Port Arthur 1898 and builds the Chinese Eastern South Manchurian railways, setting up the Russo-Japanese War. 8. Consequences. For China, strategic humiliation, the navy ruined, a rush of scramble for concessions by powers 1895 to 1900. Shock catalyzes 100 Days Reform 1898, and, later, the new policies, but factionalism persists. For Japan, international recognition as a great power contender, indemnities, finance, industrial, and naval expansion toward a 6-6 fleet. Colonial rule in Taiwan begins. Tokyo pivots to counter Russian ambitions in Manchuria, Korea. Milestones: the 25th of July, Pungdo 1517. September, tahun 1894, Pyongyang. Yalu Yellow Sea. November, Port Arthur. February 1895, Wei Highway Mark, Pescadores, 17, Upper Shimonoseki, 23 APR, triple intervention. Key figures: Li Hongzheng, Ding Ruchang, Itiv Hirobumi, Yamagata, Eritomo, Admiral Itsukayuki. Visual cues: map arrows from Korea gives Liaodong, gives Wei Highway, silhouettes of ironclads versus fast cruisers. Treaty parchment Shimonoseki gives overlay triple intervention. Quick take: Shimanoseki's shock, 1895 triggered a scramble for concessions across China and a burst of stop-start reforms. Russia surged into Manchuria and leased Port Arthur, colliding with Japan's ambitions. Tokyo consolidated rule in Taiwan, expanded its fleet, and secured the Anglo-Japanese alliance 1902, setting the stage for the Russo-Japanese War 1904-1905. 1. Reform after humiliation 1895-1898. China, defeat spurred calls to self-strengthen for real. The 100 Days Reform 1898. Under the Guangxu Emperor, advised by Kong Yue, Liang Qichao, proposed modern schools, streamlined ministries, fiscal army overhaul, and a consultative body. Backlash: court conservatives rallied around the Empress Dowager Cixi. The reform was aborted after approximately 100 days. The center reasserted control, but the credibility gap widened. Provincial actors and foreign powers filled it. 2. The scramble for concessions, 1898 to 1899. Russia leased Liaodong Port, Arthur Luchon and Dolianand, deepened control over the Chinese Eastern Railway Xia and South Manchurian lines. Germany seized Jiaozhou Kyochu. Beijing-Dao became a model colonial port. Britain took Weihai Wei to watch Russia and extended spheres in the Yangtze Valley. France, Guangdong, Zhongjiang, lease and Indo-Chinese border influence. Japan, though forced by the triple intervention to give up Liaodong, Tokyo pressed for new factories, navigation rights, and indemnity-financed build-up and focused on Taiwan as its first colony. Net effect: railways, mines, and ports proliferated under foreign flags. Sovereignty frayed into color-coded spheres on the map. 3. The Boxer Crisis 1900-1901 uprising. Anti-foreign, anti-missionary militias, Boxers, converged on North China. Court elements oscillated between suppression and endorsement. 8-nation alliance: Japan, Russia, Britain, France, Germany, US, Italy. Austria-Hungary relieved Beijing after the siege of Legation. Boxer Protocol 1901, crushing indemnities, occupation of key posts, notably in Beijing, Tianjin, and expanded rights for foreign militaries. Takeaway: China's fiscal artery tied tighter to foreign control. Japan's contingent performed capably, lifting its status among great powers. 4. Manchuria under the Russian shadow rail plus garrison equals leverage. Russia used the CERS-MR network to militarize Manchuria, stationing troops to protect lines and ports at Port Arthur Dalian. Korea next door, Russian logging rights at the Yalu, Tumen, advisors in Seoul, and loans to the Korean court signaled a push toward the Korean Strait, exactly where Japan drew its line of advantage. Friction points: customs, railway, police, fortifications, and lighthouses, mundane assets that decide war. 5. Japan consolidates a colonial state in Taiwan, 1895, gives pacification and infrastructure, quelling resistance. Tokyo built roads, ports, sugar and camphor industries, and a modern colonial administration. Strategic learning: Taiwan became a training ground for governance, logistics, and military-civil coordination skills, later projected to Korea, Manchuria. Finance and fleet: Shimonoseki indemnities and rising export earnings funded naval expansion toward standardized battle fleets and armaments compatible with European suppliers. 6. The 1902 hinge: Anglo-Japanese alliance, why Britain said yes. Check Russia in the Far East without overextending the Royal Navy. Accept Japan as a functional partner. Why Japan needed it: diplomatic deterrent and legitimacy for action if Russia refused to evacuate Manchuria. Clause to note: if Japan fought one great power, Russia, and another joined France, Britain would come in insurance for Tokyo. 7. Countdown to war: 1903, early 1904. Negotiations fail. Japan offered to recognize Russian primacy in Manchuria if Russia respected Japanese primacy in Korea. stalling and new demands from St. Petersburg undercut talks. On the ground, Russian troop rotations looked permanent. Forts and rails thickened. Korean court politics tilted under rival envoys. Tokyo's choice, a preemptive strike, could shift the balance before Russia completed consolidation. The cabinet and general staff aligned. The alliance umbrella steadied nerves. Milestones: 1898, 100 Days Reform. Concession Rush, 1901. Boxer War. Protocol 1902, Anglo-Japanese Alliance, 1903-4 failed talks. Mobilizations, key figures: Empress, Dowager Cixi, Guangxu Emperor, Kong Yue, Liang, Chicha Vita, Nicholas II, Ithirobumi, Yamagata Eritomo, Katsurata. Visual cues: concession map, heat layer, Russian rail, web in Manchuria, colonial Taiwan sugar mills, ports. The alliance treaty parchment with 1902. Quick take: Japan struck first, fought on interior lines, and coordinated Army-Navy rail better than its larger foe. Russia's fleets failed to break through. Its Manchurian army bled in set-piece battles. The Treaty of Portsmouth, September 1905, crowned Japan the new power in Northeast Asia and pushed China's Northeast Manchuria further under foreign, now Japanese leverage. 1. Opening Gambit. Night at Port Arthur, February 8 to 9, 1904. Japan delivers torpedo attacks against Russia's Pacific Squadron at Port Arthur, Lushan, before the formal war declaration issued February 10. Effect: damages Russian capital ships, pins the fleet, and lets Japan land unmolested on the Liaodong-Korea axis. 2. Land bridge into Manchuria. Yalu River, May 1, 1904. Japanese First Army crosses from Korea, beats Russian screening unit's door, to Manchuria opens. Nanshon and Dalian, late May. Hardwon Heights secure the approach to Port Arthur. Dalian becomes Japan's forward logistics port. Loyang, August-September 1904. First large set-piece battle. Japan outmaneuvers. Russians retreat north but remain intact. Shaho, October 1904. Bloody stalemate. Attrition favors Japan's rail-fed buildup. Mukden, February 20–March 10, 1905. One of the largest pre-WWI battles. Multi-layer flanking forces. Russian retreat. Japanese hold the field, but at high cost. 3. Siegecraft and the fall of Port Arthur. Siege. May 1904, January 1905. Japanese siege lines squeeze the fortress. 203-meter hill, December 1904. Captured after horrific assaults. Spotter fire from this peak smashes the Russian fleet in harbor with heavy artillery. Jan 1905, capitulation. Port Arthur falls. Japan secures a warm water bastion and the southern gate of Manchuria for command of the sea. Battle of the Yellow Sea, August 10, 1904. Russian breakout fails. Surviving ships fall back to Port Arthur. Freedom of action tilts to Japan. Tsushima, May 27 to 28, 1905. Admiral Tug Haihachiro crosses the T. Annihilates Admiral Rostevensky's Baltic fleet after its round-the-world voyage. Result: Japan gains decisive sea control, isolating Russian armies and securing supply lines. 5. Diplomacy and peace. Treaty of Portsmouth, September 5, 1905. Mediation. U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt brokers talks. Wins the 1906 Nobel Peace Prize. Terms: Russia recognizes Japan's predominance in Korea, paving the way for the 1905 Protectorate and 1910 annexation. Russia transfers the lease of the Liaodong Peninsula, Port Arthur, Dalian, and South Manchurian railway rights to Japan. Southern Sakhalin Karafuto ceded to Japan. No cash indemnity gives sparks Hibiya riots in Tokyo, revealing Japan's war weariness and debt burden. 6. Consequences for the region. With China at the center, Japan enters the first rank of powers, gains hard positions in Manchuria and a free hand in Korea. Wartime debt spurs tighter state-industry coordination. Russia, strategic setback fuels the 1905 revolution. Far Eastern policy retrenches China. Qing, shock that an Asian power defeated a European empire, electrifies reformists. Students flock to Japan. Civil service exams abolished 1905. Manchuria turns into a chessboard of Japanese rails, garrisons, and Lasisa, precursor to the later Chongqing army footprint. Global optics. The balance in East Asia flips. European empires recalibrate assumptions about Western invincibility. Milestones: February 8 to 9th, Port Arthur torpedoes. May 1st, Yalu. August, Sape Loyang. October, Shahodek, 203-meter hill. January 1905, Port Arthur surrenders. Febmar Mukden. May 27 to 28, Tsushima Sept 5 Portsmouth. Key figures: Tug Haihachiro, Kiyama Iwao, Nogi, Mersuk, Rotsvensky, Kuropakin, Theodore Roosevelt. Visual cues: Map arrows Korea, gives Liaodong, gives Mukden, siege lines around Port Arthur. Tog Ziflag at Tsushima, Treaty Parchment, Portsmouth, 1905. Quick take: fresh from defeating Russia, Japan moved from protectorate to annexation in Korea, and welded a quasi-colonial state across South Manchuria. Railways, police, and bureaucracies, not just bayonets, did the heavy lifting. The result: a durable logistics administrative belt from Dalian Port Arthur up through Chongqing, and a locked grip on the Korean peninsula, preconditions for the shocks of the 1930s. 1. From protectorate to annexation. Seoul gives Tokyo's writ, Ulsa Treaty. November 1905, Korea becomes a Japanese protectorate. Foreign affairs transferred to Tokyo. Hirobumi installed as resident general in Seoul. Disarming the state. The Korean army is disbanded in 1907. Righteous armies, Ubiong wage guerrilla resistance across the countryside. Palace politics, under pressure. Emperor Guzhong abdicates 1907 in favor of Sunjong after unsuccessfully seeking international help. Harbin shock, October 1909. Korean nationalist An Jong-gun assassinates Itwa Hirobumi. The incident accelerates annexation plans. Annexation, August 1910. The Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty dissolves the Korean Empire. The Government General of Korea, GGK, replaces the residency military bureaucratic rule begins. 2. Building a colonial state in Korea, police and gendarmerie, dense constabulary networks, intelligence files, and pass systems extend reach into villages. Land Survey 1910s, comprehensive cadastral mapping, reclassification, registration transfers vast acreage into state or Japanese landlord hands. Rent and tax extraction professionalized. Rails and grain, lines like Gyeongbu Solbazan and Gyeongui Solsinuij sink the peninsula with Japanese ports. Rice exports to Japan rise, binding food security to colonial logistics. Schools and assimilation. Primary schooling expands with Japanese medium curricula. Elite tracks open but tightly gated. Shinto rites and language policies signal cultural subordination. Industry seeds. Early light industry, sugar, textiles, harbor works, and urban police planning in Seoul. Incheon Bizona template, later scaled in the 1930s. 3. South Manchuria, Rail Empire, leasehold, and a garrison. Chongqing, leased territory. Port Arthur, Ryojin, Dalian, Deran, governed as a fortified colonial hub. Docks, warehouses, and shipyards. Service, Army-Navy supply. South Manchurian Railway, SMR, Montatu 1906, more than a railway, a company state with police, research bureau, hospitals, and schools. It plans cities, for example, Dalian and industrial corridors. Profits fund further expansion. Changchun as hinge, junction between Russian and Japanese gauges, a springboard toward the interior. Troops as line guards. The Kwantung garrison protects rails and ports, an institutional seed that will become the Kwantung Army, later the prime mover in 1931. For great power sign-offs and quiet bargains. Taft-Katsura Memorandum 1905. Washington tacitly accepts Japan's primacy in Korea, while Tokyo recognizes U.S. control of the Philippines. Rutakahira Agreement 1908. U.S.-Japan affirm open door and territorial status. Quote, diplomatic cover for Japan's day-to-day consolidation. Jiandao Gando Convention 1909. Tokyo recognizes Qing sovereignty in the Jiandao border region while extracting railway police concessions elsewhere. Trade-offs by treaty. 5. What this meant for China. Qing exposed in the northeast, with Russians checked and Japanese entrenched. Manchuria's levers, rail, customs points, ports increasingly answered to Tokyo. Reform urgency at home. Beijing's new policies, Shinseng accelerate. Schools, police, provincial assemblies, but fiscal military centralization still lags. A new normal. Foreign statecraft by corporation. SMR plus leasehold. Governance becomes the method of empire in North China. Hard, to confront without a unified modern state. Milestones: 1905, also Residency General. 1907, Army disbanded. Gozhong abdicates. 1908, Ruta Kahira. 1909, Harbin assassination. Jiandao. 1910, annexation. GGK 1906 SMR in operation. Key figures: It Hirobumi in Jungun, Terauchi Masatake, Gojong Sunjong, Gotu Shinpei, SMR, Colonial Planner. Visual cues: Map, Belt Dalian Enshin Seoul Bison, SMR timetable poster, cadastral survey sheets, police outpost with rail in background. Quick take: The Qing falls, 1911, and a fragile republic rises, only to splinter under Yuan Shikai and competing Beiyang warlords. During World War I, Japan seizes German assets in Shandong and forces the 21 Demands, 1915, converting China's weakness into treaty leverage. The betrayal at Versailles 1919 ignites the May 4th movement, a political and cultural turn that reshapes China's road to resistance in the 1930s. 1. The Qing collapses. A republic in name 1911 to 1913. Wuchang Uprising, October 1911. Cascades into provincial secession. Sun Yat-sen declared provisional president in Nanjing. A brokered compromise. Yuan Shikai, commander of the Beiyang army, secures the abdication of the Zhuantong Emperor Pui and takes the presidency. 1912. Reality check. Central institutions are thin. Provincial militaries hold real power. Fiscal capacity rests with customs and salt taxes already entangled in foreign controls. 2. Yuan's autocracy and abortive monarchy. 1913 to 1916. Yuan crushes the Second Revolution. 1913. Bans the Nationalist Party GMD and re-centralizes by decree. 1915. He declares himself emperor. Backlash from south and southwest, plus northern factions, triggers a national protection war. June 1916, Yuan dies. The emperor project collapses. The Beiyang clique fractures, opening the High Warlord era. 3. Japan's wartime window, Shandong, and the 21 Demands. 1915. With Europe consumed by WWI, Japan captures Qingdao, Qingtao, 1914, and German holdings in Shandong, gains former German islands in the Pacific. 21 Demands. Tokyo presses Beijing for sweeping rights, extending leases in South Manchuria, control over Hanyeping mining, steel, and advisors in key ministries. Under pressure, China accepts most of the first 4 groups. Backlash at home and abroad forces Japan to drop the most blatant political clauses, but the balance tilts decisively toward Tokyo. For warlord finance and the Nishihara loans, 1917 to 18. Beiyang strongman Duan Kirui seeks funds to build a national army and reassert control. Japan supplies loans tied to railway, mining, and police concessions acquired upon for cash exchange. Net effect: paper sovereignty, contractual control, rail stations, mines, and police jurisdictions in north-northeast China answer increasingly to Japanese interests. 5. China in World War I and the Versailles Shock. 1917-1919. China declares war on Germany. 1917. Chinese Labor Corps serves in Europe. Beijing hopes to recover Shandong at the peace table. Versailles 1919. Conference assigns Shandong rights to Japan, not China. 6. Political and cultural consequences. Delegitimization of warlord Beijing deepens. Sun Yat-sen reorganizes the GMD in the south, seeking a party army model to reunify China. Intellectual realignment. Journals and study societies debate liberalism, socialism, and Marxism. Groundwork laid for the founding of the CCP. Japan's position, entrenched in Korea, South Manchuria, and now Shandong treaty rights, a triangle of leverage around North China. Milestones: 1911, Wuchang Republic. 1912, Yuan President. 1914, Qingdao, taken. 1915, 21 Demands. Yuan's monarchy bid. 1916, Yuan dies. 1917, Nishihara loans. 1919, Versailles. May 4th. Key figures: Sun Yat-sen, Yuan Shikai, Duan Qiri, Liang, Chiqiao Kong. UA intellectuals. Pui. Visual cues. Mapped with German Shandong. Gives Japanese overlay. Student crowds, with placards, return Shandong to China. A ledger showing loans, concessions. Foreshadow. Next chapter 10, 1919 to 1930. New culture to united fronts. Warlord chessboard. Zhongzualin, Zhongzuliang, the Northern Expedition, Jinan Incident, 1928, and the Wangatun Bombing, 1928. The preface to Mukden, 1931. Quicktake. The May 4th aftershock remade Chinese politics, birthing new parties and ideas, backed by Soviet aid. The First United Front GMD-CCP launched the Northern Expedition 1926–1928, toppling warlords and forging a Nanjing government. Yet the alliance shattered in Shanghai's 1927 White Terror. Japan clashed with the GMD at Jinan 1928, and although Zhongzuliang pledged Manchuria to Nanjing, the regime soon bled strength in the Central Plains War 1930, leaving North China fragile on the eve of January 1931. From May 4th to party building 1919 to 1923. May 4th, 1919. Student strikes over Versailles. Shandong widen into a national movement. Boycotts of Japanese goods. Calls for science and democracy. An intellectual ferment. New parties. GMD nationalists. Sun Yat-sen rebuilds in Guangzhou, experimenting with a party-army model. CCP 1921. Small Marxist study circles coalesce into a party, oriented to workers and peasants. Comintern mediation. Moscow brokers. GMDC-CP cooperation sends advisors, arms, and funds to institutions for revolution. Whampoa and the United Front, 1923–1925. Sunjaf Declaration 1923, USSR recognizes Chinese unity. GMD adopts a Leninist party, structure cells, discipline. Whampoa Military Academy, 1924. Chiang Kai-shek as commandant. Zhou Enlai Political Directorate cadres for a modern national army. Workers and student upsurge 1925. May 30th movement in Shanghai. Canton Hong Kong strike. Mass politics sharpen anti-imperial energy. 3. The Northern Expedition rolls 1926–1927. Launch mid-1926. GMD armies advance from Guangdong into Hunan Hubei, defeating Wu Peifu and breaking Zhongzulin's southern lines. Warlord chessboard flips. The Jilian Hui and Fengshan cliques fracture. Feng Yuxiang, the Christian general, shifts allegiances. Urban centers fall in sequence. Labor and peasant mobilizations swell behind the front, also alarming landlords, financiers, and foreign interests. 4. April 12, 1927, Shanghai, rupture. White Terror. Chiang aligns with industrialists, police, and secret societies to crush CCP-led unions in Shanghai. Thousands arrested or killed. Split. GMD Wuhan left denounces Chiang. Moscow urges a countercourse. By summer, the United Front is broken, and the CCP begins armed uprisings. Nanjing. Autumn harvest failed militarily, but ceding rural bases. 5. To Beijing and a new capital. 1928. Nanjing regime. Chiang consolidates in Nanjing. Ministries, tariffs, and foreign relations centralized on paper. Jinan Incident, May 1928. As GMD pushes through Shandong, clashes with Japanese troops, kill Chinese civilians and officers. Tokyo asserts protection of its national Zan omen for the North China question. Beijing falls, June 1928. GMD forces enter. The city is renamed Beiping, as Nanjing becomes the national capital. 6 Manchurias, pivot made and unmade, late 1928. Wangatun bombing, June 1928. Zhongzuolin is assassinated. Near Shenyang, widely attributed to Kuomintang Army, extremists acting without Tokyo's clear sanction. Northeast flag replacement, December 1928. Zhongzuliang declares allegiance to Nanjing. Customs and diplomacy nominally unified. Reality check. Japanese SMR, South Manchurian Railway. Police and garrisons still anchor de facto leverage across the northeast. 7. A fragile unification. Finance, factions, and a border with clause 1929-1930 state building strain. Currency pluralism, patchwork taxation, and war debts hobble central capacity. Roads and rails expand unevenly. Civil war redux Central Plains War 1930. Chiang versus coalition. Feng Yuxiang, Yan Shishan, Li Zongren by Chongqing. The government wins, but the victory bleeds men and treasure, sapping readiness in North China. Japanese encroachment resumes. Autonomy schemes flicker in Hubei. Chahar Montetsu research and police quietly widen influence corridors. Milestones 1919 May 4, 1921 CCP founded 1923-24 Whampoa United Front 1926-27 Northern Expedition April 12, 1927 Shanghai Purge May-June 1928 Jinan Beijing captured June-December 1928 Wangutun Flag Replacement 1930 Central Plains War Key figures Sun Yat-sen, Chiang Kai-shek, Zhou Enlai, Zhang Zuolin, Zhang Zuliang, Feng Yuxiang. Visual cues United Front banner gives split-screen Nanjing vs Wuhan. Arrowed map from Guangzhou to Beiping. Photo tag Jinan 1928. Portrait swap Zuolin gives Zuliang. Ledger war costs cohesion. Foreshadow. Next asterisk chapter 11. 1931, 1932 Mukden, the fall of the Northeast, and the birth of Manchukuo as the Kwantong Army converts rail empires into a puppet state. Quick take. On September 18, 1931, officers of Japan's Kwantong Army staged the Mukden Lutiahu incident, using a small blast on the South Manchuria Railway as pretext to seize Manchuria. In months, China's northeast 3 provinces fell. In March 1932, Tokyo installed Manchukuo with Puyi as figurehead. The Lytton Commission condemned the conquest. Japan exited the League of Nations, signaling that force, not forums, would decide North China's future. 1. A powder keg after 1928 structures in place. Japan already held the Kwantung-Lease territory. The South Manchurian Railway, SMR, Montetsu, and railguard garrisons. Chinese side, Zhang Zuliang's Northeast Army was large on paper, but scattered, underfunded, and politically constrained by Nanjing's priority to avoid a frontal war. Mindset in Liaodong, Shenyang. Kwantong officers, for example, Ishiwara Kanji, Itagaki Sashiro, believed Manchuria was Japan's lifeline, a grain collier belt, and strategic buffer. 2. Night of September 18, 1931. The fuse is lit. A small charge damages track near Liushio Lake. Blame is pinned on Chinese troops. Pre-planned moves roll out. Japanese columns hit Shenyang Mukden positions. Air units bomb nearby barracks. Rail nodes are seized. Chinese response. Bound by avoid war orders and outmaneuvered. Northeast Army units withdraw. Command paralysis spreads. 3. A campaign at railroad speed. November 1931. Using SMR corridors as operational highways, the Kwantong Army secures Chongqing, Gilan-Kirin, Harbin, then drives toward the Sungari, Nen River lines. Localized resistance. General Ma Zhanxin briefly defends the Nanjing bridge, a symbol of defiance, but cannot halt the tide. By winter, the 3 provinces are effectively under Japanese control or in fragmented Chinese hands north of the Great Rivers. 4. From occupation to Manchukuo, March 1932. Tokyo's blueprint. Convert conquest into a client state to legitimize rule and harness resources. Puyi, the last Qing emperor, is brought from Tianjin to serve as chief executive of the new Manchukuo emperor. Title will follow in 1934. Montetsu plus police plus cabinet equals a company state. Rail, police, peace preservation units, model cities, Dalian, Xinjiang, Changchun, and development boards knit administration to extraction. 5. International blowback and limits. Stimson Doctrine, January 1932. The U.S. announces non-recognition of territorial changes achieved by force. League of Nations Lytton Commission, 1932. After months of inquiry, it concludes Japan's self-defense claim is untenable and calls for Manchuria's autonomy under Chinese sovereignty. Japan's answer rejects the report. By 1933, withdraws from the League. A public bet that facts on rails beat votes in Geneva. 6. What this collapse changed inside China. Strategic. The northern shield is gone. Japan now sits on China's flank, with rails reaching toward Johor. Political. Nanjing's non-resistance line shreds credibility. Student and urban protests surge. Volunteer armies form but lack heavy weapons. Military. The Northeast Army's retreat, South fuels factional bitterness. Resources must now be shifted to Great Wall approaches. 7. The method becomes the message. The Manchurian blueprint, Rao-led militarization, puppet governance, police intelligence, and corporate planning proves a repeatable model. It will soon be exported southward, alongside pressure on Hubei, and a sudden flare-up in the lower Yangtze that tests Shanghai itself. Milestones. September 18, 1931, Mukden. October-November, Changchun Harbin, taken. Nanjing fighting. March 1932, Manchukuo proclaimed. Puiqui installed. January 1932, Stimson Doctrine. October 1932, Lytton Report. Ma 1933, Japan leaves League. Key figures: Ishiwara, Konji, Itagaki, Cicero, Pui, Zhang Zuliang, Majantian. Visual cues: night map with rail nodes flipping to Japanese control. Photo-style card Py gives. Chief Executive. 1932. League Chamber versus. A train timetable. Geneva votes. Rails decide. Quick take. Weeks after Manchuria fell, Tokyo tested China's will at Shanghai, a global city, under foreign concessions, with heavy Japanese stakes. From January 28 to early March 1932, the 19th Route Army held block-to-block against Japanese Marines, sailors, and army reinforcements. The fight ended with a May 5 ceasefire that demilitarized Greater Shanghai's symbolic Chinese resolve. Strategic Japanese gains. 1. Why Shanghai mattered. Leverage. International settlement and French concession equals foreign shields around a Chinese metropolis, with large Japanese communities and assets. Signal a quick police action here. Kakao Nanjing without a formal nationwide war. Backdrop. League debates on Manchuria dragged on. Tokyo gambled that facts on the ground would outpace diplomacy again. 2. Spark gives escalation. January 18 to 28. Street clashes and anti-Japanese boycotts spiraled after the killing of a Japanese monk. Ultimatums followed. Night of January 28. The IJN 3rd Fleet, ADM, Shiozawa Kiechi, shells Jabei Chapa, a Marines land from the Wangpu. Japan frames operations as protection of nationals. China orders local defense but tries to avoid widening the war. 3. The stand of the 19th Route Army commanders, Kinzai Tinkai and Jiang Guangnai, fortify streets, factories, and warehouses. Urban warfare slows Japanese advances. Jabei burns. Naval gunfire and airstrikes torch dense blocks. Civilians flee through concession checkpoints. Chinese reinforcements' Fifth Army elements arrive piecemeal. Artillery is scarce. Ammo tight. Time, not tonnage, is the Chinese weapon. 4. Japan ups the anti-Shanghai Expeditionary Army. Gen Shirakawa, Yoshinori lands. Coordinated Army-Navy Air pushes pry open Chinese lines. By early March, superior firepower, aviation, and logistics grind defenders back from Jabei North Station toward the demarcation line. 5. Diplomacy clamps the lid. March-May foreign powers fear spillover into concessions. Mediation accelerates. May 5, 1932, Shanghai ceasefire agreement creates a demilitarized zone around Greater Shanghai. Chinese regulars withdraw. Japan may maintain limited forces to protect its nationals and settlement approaches. Front refreezes without a formal peace status quo under Japanese leverage. 6. Shockwaves and afterlives. Morale. China hails the 19th Route. Armies stand rare. Urban resistance after the Northeast disaster. Politics. The same army later rebels against Nanjing in the Fujian Incident. Late 1933, a reminder of fractured national command, terror and prestige. On April 29, 1932, a Korean patriot's Honku Park bombing kills Gen Shirakawa and other Japanese dignitaries. Volatility. Military lessons. Tokyo tests naval aviation and joint ops in a city fight. Beijing Nanjing learns that air artillery supremacy will decide the next round. Milestones. January 28 bombardment, landing February Ma. Street-by-street fighting. April 29, Honku bombing. May 5, ceasefire, demilitarized zone. Key figures: Sai Tinkai, Jiang Guangnai, ADM, Shiozawa Kiechi, Gen Shirakawa Yoshinori. Visual cues: map of settlements versus Jabei Paya line. Biplanes over warehouses. Ceasefire ring around Shanghai. Quick take. After installing Manchukuo, Japan pushed beyond Manchuria. In early 1933, the Kuomintang Army seized Johor and forced its way through Great Wall passes Shanhai, Guengubaku, Shifanku, Lankou. China fought stubborn but fragmented, delaying actions. On May 31, 1933, the Tangu Truce froze the front. created a demilitarized zone in Hubei, and left North China under Japan's immediate shadow. 1. From Manchuria to Ri, Operation Necker, Weicha Hole, to eliminate Chinese staging grounds on Manchukuo's southwest flank, and link Liaoningjilin control to the Great Wall. How it moved: rail-fed infantry, mobile cavalry, and air support. Manchukuo auxiliary units followed behind. Outcome: Feb-March 1933, Chengde Falls. Ri is annexed to Manchukuo. Japan's frontier jumps to the Great Wall. 2. The defense of the Great Wall, Jan-May 1933. Shanhaiguan, January 3. Surprise night attack opens the sea gate into North China. Pass fighting, Gubeku, Shifingku, Lenkostone, gateways turned killing grounds. Elements of China's 29th Army Song Jejuan and other formations hold ridgelines with thin artillery and shorter logistics. Air artillery edge, Japanese biplanes and heavy guns pry open positions. Chinese counterattacks by time, not reversal. 3. Politics behind the lines. Nanjing's calculus. After the Northeast disaster, an ongoing factional financial strain, the central government prioritizes avoidance of total war while rebuilding forces. Command frictions. Provincial units answer unevenly. Coordination along the wall is patchy. Propaganda elevates defend the Great Wall to sustain morale despite withdrawals. 4. The Tangu Truce, May 31, 1933. Core terms: recognizes the status quo. Jahol Manchuria, under Japanese Manchukuo control, establishes a demilitarized zone south of the Great Wall, in Hubei, policed by a lightly armed Peace Preservation Corps, Chinese in name, under Japanese oversight. No Chinese regulars or fortifications inside the zone. Japan keeps Shanhaiguan approaches to protect nationals. Net effect: a paper peace that legalizes the advance and pushes Chinese forces back from Beijing-Tianjin's doorstep. 5. Strategic consequences: Beijing-Tianjin exposed. The DMZ becomes a corridor of leverage into North China's politics, police, and railways. Method perfected. Rails plus air plus limited objective offensives gives ceasefire, gives administrative penetration. What worked in Manchuria is now applied to Hubei. Chaha, morale versus reality. The Great Wall defense becomes a symbol of grit. The truce, a reminder that grit without parity in air power, artillery, and logistics cannot hold a line. Milestones: Jan 3, Shanhaiguan, Feb-Mari, Chengde taken, Ma-Mei. Great Wall battles: Gubeku Shifengkulanko, May 31, Tangu Truce, Hubei DMZ. Key figures: Song Jiuan, 29th Army, He Yingqin, Nanjing High Command, Doihara Kenji, Atokwantang Army Planners, Pui, as Manchukuo Fasaj. Visual cues: snow-dusted Great Wall passes with unit arrows. A stamp: Tangu, the 31st of May 1933, over a shaded DMZ band. Railway line from Shanhaiguan toward Tianjin glowing as a lever. Quick take: after the Tangu Truce, 1933, Japan avoided a full-dress war and instead hollowed out North China with armistice zones, police pacts, and autonomy fronts. 1935, Dealsu Mizu and Chin Doihara nationalist troops out of Hubei and muzzled anti-Japanese groups. Puppet bodies like East Hubei Autonomous Council appeared. The Hubei Chaha Political Council tried to stem the loss. Under mounting outrage, Zhang Zuliang seized Chiang Kai-shek at Sheon, December 1936, forcing a united front against Japan. One after Tangu, leveraged by paperwork, police, and rails. DMZ in Hubei from 1933, policed by a Peace Preservation Corps, nominally Chinese but screened by Japan. Kwantong Army plus Montetsu expand influence via rail police, customs posts, and local gendarmes. Pro-Tokyo public security groups bloom along rail spurs and market towns. 2. The 1935 Squeeze 2 agreements. 1. Outcome: Hiyumizu Agreement, June 1935. Signatories: Hiyinkin, Nanjing, and Yumizu, Yoshijiro, Japan. Terms: unpublished, understood. Withdraw KMT troops from most of Hubei. Ban anti-Japanese organizations, for example, Blue Shirts, committees, and tighten control of education press in the zone. Doihara Agreement, late June 1935. Signatories: Chin Dechin, North China Commander, Dandoihara Kenji Kwantang intelligence extends the formula into Chahar, curbing Chinese deployments and sanitizing politics near the Manchukuo frontier. Net effect: a military vacuum south of the Great Wall. Japanese advisors and proxies step in. 3. Puppet autonomies and the East Hebei Autonomous Council, November 1935. Yin Rugging fronts a Japanese-backed mini-regime headquartered near Tongju. It fields its own police troops and issues decrees under Tokyo's wing. Hubei Chahar Political Council, December 1935. Song Jae-yuan 29th Army creates a semi-autonomous body under Nanjing's umbrella, a stopgap to keep North China from splintering fully while avoiding instant war with Japan. Tug-of-war on the ground. Taxes, salt monopolies, rail freight, and school curricula become political weapons. Each new bylaw redraws sovereignty in miniature. 4. Society under pressure. Outrage on campus boycotts and petitions. Students and merchants in Beiping Tianjin rally against concessions. Arrests rise as public order rules expand. Volunteer militias form in the countryside but lack artillery, radios, and steady pay. Propaganda valorizes them, while Nanjing restrains escalation. Assassinations terror flicker on both sides, deepening mistrust and feeding Japanese narratives of instability. 5. Chiang's calculus versus the Northeast Army's fury. Chiang Kai-shek's line. First internal pacification, then external resistance defeats CCP bases, rebuild industry, railways, buy time against Japan. Zhang Zuliang's stance. Having lost Manchuria 1931-32, he demands immediate anti-Japanese unity. His Northeast Army bleeds in anti-communist campaigns it resents. Friction sharpens 1936. As Japanese leverage tightens in Hubei Chahar, Chiang orders continued encirclement of the Yan'an base. Morale fractures among northern commanders. 6. The Xi'an Incident, December 12 to 25, 1936. Deck 12. In Xi'an, Zhong Zuliang with Yang Hukeng detains Chiang Kai-shek, demanding, "Stop civil war, free political prisoners, form a united front against Japan." Negotiations, emissaries, including Song Meiling, Zhou Enlai, craft a face-saving deal. Moscow also urges unity against fascism. Outcome: Chiang is released. Charges against Jiang later lead to house arrest. Politically, however, the Second United Front is born in principle. The strategic break on Japan's nibbling is finally released. 7. Why these 3 years mattered on the map. Without a formal invasion, Japan gained police keys to North China's Hubei Chahar became administratively penetrated terrain. Inside China, public rage plus officer discontent converged at Xi'an, compelling a national shift from civil war priority to resistance priority. Next step inevitable. Once the United Front idea solidified, any friction point, especially near Beiping, Tianjin or rail nodes, risked igniting total war. Milestones. June 1935, Huma's Uchindohera. November 1935, East Hebei Autonomous Council. December 1935, Hubei Chahar Political Council. December 12 to 25, 1936, Xi'an Incident. Chiang released. Key figures: Chiang Kai-shek, Zhong Zuliang, He Yinkin, Song Jae-yuan, Doihara, Kenji Umezu, Yoshijiro, Yin Rugging, Zhou Enlai. Visual cues: Hubei Chahar map, shaded for DMZ, plus autonomy zones. A ledger icon: agreements gives withdrawals, gives police control. A calendar page, December 12, 1936, over Xi'an's city wall. Quick take: a night clash at Marco Polo Bridge, Lugokyo, July 7, 1937, spiraled into total war. Japan overran Beiping Tianjin and pushed through Shanxi, while both sides hurled elite formations into Shanghai August-November in a brutal urban meat grinder. China showed will and inflicted costs. But Japanese sea air supremacy and maneuver through Honjo Bay cracked the front, opening the road to Nanjing. Spark at Lugokyo gives war without declaration, July 7th to 31st. Night exercise. Missing soldier. Shots fired near Humping by Ping's southwest. Attempts at local truce fail as reinforcements arrive on both sides. The 29th to the 30th of July, Beiping, Peking and Tianjin fall to Japanese forces. The Tongju Incident. Mutiny by East Hebei, troops killing Japanese, Korean civilians hardens Tokyo's narrative for escalation. The Second United Front GMDCCP forms in principle. Propaganda shifts from internal pacification to national resistance. 2. North China Campaign, railways, passes, and a famous ambush. August. Axes of advance along the Jing'an by Pingxingguan and Jingshui by Pingxingguan lines. Heavy fighting in Hubei and Shaanxi. Battle of Taiyuan Theater Sepnovi. Shenkou in Yangziguan passes. Chinese armies Yanxi Shaanxi troops plus Central Army elements. Trade costly defensive battles against superior Japanese artillery. Air. Pingxingguan ambush, September 25th. 8th Route Army under Lin Bao. Peng Dehuai Moles, a Japanese supplied colomiconic morale boost for the CCP within the United Front narrative. By mid-November, Taiyuan falls. North China's coal rail hub tilts decisively to Japan. 3. Why Shanghai Chang's strategic gamble. August. Political and diplomatic theater. Defending China, as most international city would show resolve to domestic audiences and foreign powers. Military wager. Forced Japan to fight far from Manchuria, draw in its navy, marines, and bleed elite units in a city fight rather than open country. 4. The Battle of Shanghai. 3 grinding phases. August Nov, Phase 1, August 30. Clashes around Jubei, North Station, Wusong. 87th and 88th Divisions German trained. Anchor the line. Advisors like von Falkenhausen help staff work. August 14th, Black Saturday. Chinese air raid goes awry, bombs the international settlement, tragic civilian toll, diplomatic blow. Phase 2. Japanese land, more divisions, naval gunfire and carrier-borne strikes pound Chinese positions. Street fighting eats battalions house by house. Chinese reserves arrive piecemeal. Artillery, ammo, shortages bite. Casualty rates soar on both sides. Phase 3. Late Octanove, Honjo Bay Landing, Ginshanwei. October 26th, executes a wide amphibious flanking south of the city. Chinese line risks encirclement. Sihung Warehouse defense. October 26th, November 1st. The 800 heroes hold out beside the international settlement. Symbolic last stand boosting morale nationwide. By mid-Nov, the Chinese army withdraws towards Suzhihang-Suzhou-Jiaxing-Hanzhou corridor. Shanghai falls. 5. Air power industry and foreign help. Japanese edge. Sea control, carrier aviation, and heavy artillery decide tempo. Riverine flotillas exploit the Yangtze. Chinese resilience, dispersal of workshops, makeshift anti-air, and Soviet aid begins after the August 21st Sino-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. Volunteer pilots, aircraft arriving in autumn. International optics, journalists and diplomats in Shanghai broadcast images of urban hell. China's cause gains sympathy. Formal alliances do not. 6 Costs and consequences. Chinese losses. A large share of German-trained elites attrited leadership experience grows, but command cohesion frays under pressure. Japanese costs. High casualties for elite marines, army units. Proof that China will not collapse quickly. Strategic outcome. With Shanghai secured, Japan pivots along the lower Yangtze, aiming to seize the capital at Nanjing before winter. Milestones. July 7th, Marco Polo Bridge. July 29th to 30th, Beiping, Tianjin Fall. Tongzhou, September 25th, Pingxingguan ambush. August 13th, November, Battle of Shanghai. October 26th, Honjo Bay landing. November, Shanghai falls. Retreat toward Nanjing. Key figures: Chang, Kishek, Yan, Shishan, Ci Tinkai, Jiang Guannai. Shanghai phase: Lin Bao, Peng Dehuai, Pingxingguan. Japanese Matsui, Iwane. Navy commanders in the 3rd Fleet. Visual cues: split map. North China rail axis versus Shanghai street grid. Carrier planes over the Wangpu. Sihung warehouse, silhouette with quick take. After the Shanghai meat grinder, Japanese forces drove up the lower Yangtze, encircled Nanjing, and took the capital on December 13, 1937. In the 6 weeks that followed, large-scale killings, sexual violence, looting, and arson devastated soldiers and civilians, alike remembered as the Nanjing Massacre. A small band of foreigners ran a safety zone that saved many but could not stop the crimes. The fall of the capital stiffened Chinese resolve and shocked the world. 1. Road to the capital. November-December 1937. Operational context. With Shanghai lost, Chinese forces fell back along the Suzhou-Jiaxing-Hanzhou corridor. Japanese amphibious seaborne moves kept flanking the retreat. Chinese command, Tang Shengzi organized Nanjing's defense mixed Central Army units, provincial troops, cadets, short on heavy guns, air cover, ultimatum and encirclement. Japan issued a December 9 ultimatum. Columns pressed from the east and south. Riverine flotillas closed the Xieguan docks. No clean exit. 2. The fall December 12 to 13. Breaks in the wall. Gates and strongpoints. Zhongshan Guangua, Shizishang cracked under artillery assault. Command collapse. On December 12, Tamps withdrew. Orders to break out west came late and contradictory. Thousands crowded the Yangtze Bank. Many surrendered en masse around Xieguan Deck 13. Japanese banners on the city wall. Nanjing captured. 3. The massacre mid-December 1937 gives January 1938 pattern of violence. Mass shootings of prisoners and captured troops, often after forced disarming in groups. Widespread sexual violence and abductions. Looting, arson across working-class districts and suburbs. Duration and scale, roughly 6 weeks. Contemporary tribunals and later scholarship cite very large casualties, hundreds of thousands in some official Chinese tallies. Figures vary among historians. Units command, field formations, notably elements of the 6th and 16th Divisions, operated under Gen Matsui. Iwane, the role of Prince Asaka and senior staff remains central to later debates on command responsibility. Editorial care, describe events with sobriety. Avoid sensational detail. The scale and intent are the core facts. 4. The Nanjing Safety Zone. Rescue amid terror. International Committee. John Rabe Siegmans, German Nazi Party member, leveraging his flag. Mini-voter in Jinling College. Dr. Robert O. Wilson and others demarcated a safety zone in western Nanjing, sheltering well over 100,000 civilians. Limits Committee passes reduced, but couldn't halt abuses. Diaries, letters, Rabe's, notes, Vautrin's, journal, hospital records became crucial testimonies. 5. Chinese aftermath. Retreat, resolve, reorganization, political. The national government shifted to Wuhan, then to Chongqing in 1938. The capital's loss did not end resistance. Propaganda unified total war messaging. Military. Scattered units regrouped at Priver. Yangtze Valley became the next contested axis. Command failures. In Tang's flight faced inquiry, but manpower and shortages limited purges. 6. World reaction and a long fuse to sanctions. Witnesses and press, diplomats, missionaries, and doctors cabled reports. Global newspapers carried harrowing accounts. Diplomacy. The League offered little beyond censure. The US and Britain lodged protests. Over 1,938-41. Outrage fed into boycotts, export controls, and ultimately escalating US embargoes on Japan. 7. Memory and judgment. Post-war trials. The IMTFE, Tokyo, 1946-48, convicted Gen Matsui Iwane. The Nanjing War Crimes Tribunal, 1947, tried additional officers, for example, Tony Hisa. Historiography, survivor testimony, diaries, and forensic work underpin the consensus of systematic large-scale atrocities. Debates persist over exact numbers and chains of command. Legacy. Nanjing became a moral cornerstone of Chinese wartime memory and a recurring fault line in Sino-Japanese relations. Milestones. December 9 ultimatum. December 12 Chinese command withdraws. Failed breakout. December 13 city falls. Mid-Deccan massacre period. Early 90s. Key figures. Tongshengzi Chang, Kishek Matsui, Iwane, Prince Asaka, Nakajima Kisugo, John Rabe, Minnie Vautrin, Robert O. Wilson. Visual cues. City wall silhouette with breached gate icons. Safety zone map inset. Typed diary pages overlaying a muted cityscape. A calendar spanning Quicktake. After Shanghai and Nanjing, the war pivoted to the Yangtze heartland. China won a morale victory at Taiyuan but lost Suzhou, and after a summer of attrition, the Wuhan Tri-Cities, Hankou Hanyang Wuchang. In October 1938, Japan simultaneously seized Guangzhou Canton to choke seaborne supply. The national government shifted inland to Chongqing, scattering industry and universities a river. In 1939, China stabilized lines with defensive victories at Changsha and hard counterblows like Kunlan Pass, while Soviet aid and the opening of the Burma Road kept the war economy breathing despite escalating Chongqing bombings. 1. Suzhou Corridor. from Tai's Huang high to a strategic low. May 1938, Tai's Huang, Marapia, under Li's Ungrin, Chinese forces encircle and smash. Japanese spearheads a rare set-piece victory that electrifies morale. Shuzhou campaign. Japan regroups, envelops the salient. Shuzhou falls May, forcing Chinese armies into costly breakouts south and west. Yellow River flood, June 1938. Chinese engineers breach dikes at Wayuankou to slow the advance delay in Japan, but causing devastating civilian losses and long-term agrarian ruin across Hannan-on-Hui to Wuhan. The summer campaign that bled both sides, June-October 1938. Why Wuhan mattered. Rail, river hub, interim political center, and symbol, after Ereva War, Japanese carrier and land-based aviation pound depots, Yangtze flotillas push inland. China disperses workshops, shuttles, troops along lake river lines, and fields Soviet-supplied aircraft. Post-August 21, 1937, packed ground fighting on Hubei plains and Dabi foothills, sea-grinding offensives, counterattacks, ammunition and heavy artillery shortages dog Chinese formations. Outcome October 1938, after attrition and flanking, Hankou Hanyang, Wuchang fall, political center moves to Chongqing. The war becomes explicitly protracted. 3. The southern cutoff, Guangzhou, and the coastal choke. October 1938. In a complementary thrust, Japanese forces seize Guangzhou and nearby ports to sever maritime lifelines from Hong Kong and Southeast Asia. Hainan Island, February 1939. Later becomes a forward base to interdict traffic in the Gulf of Tonkin and South China Sea. Result: China leans harder on Indo-China Rail, Haiphongkonming, and the Burma Road. For the inland turn, Chongqing as fortress capital, government and industry relocation. Ministries, arsenals, and universities trek upriver. Factories are dismantled and reassembled in Sichuan. The National Southwest Associated University Lianda forms in Kunming. Chongqing bombings 1938-43. Japan launches sustained air raids to terrorize population and disrupt administration. Civilians shelter in caves, tunnels, civil defense, fire brigades, and underground workshops proliferate. Propaganda and will. Gongkang, united resistance messaging hardens. The inland rear becomes the political theater of endurance. 1939. Holding lines, testing Japan's reach. First Battle of Changsha. Sept-October 1939. Zuyu orchestrates elastic defense and counterstrokes along the Shang River. Japan, repulsed, a strategic signal that inland lines can hold. Nanjing, May 1939. Japan wins locally but at cost. Chinese counterattacks at Swixen-Ziyang may demonstrate improved operational coordination. Kunlun Pass, December 1939 – January 1940. In Guangxi, Chinese forces under Du Uming-Guanlinseng retake the pass, killing a Japanese division commander. Sharp local success that protects the last overland corridors. 6. Lifelines and foreign angles. Burma Road completed 1938. A 1,100 km mountain artery, Lashio Kunming, begins funneling trucks of fragile, but decisive until 1942. Soviet aid 193739. Fighters, bombers, tanks, advisors, and credits flow via Xinjiang in the southwest. Soviet volunteer air units duel the IJA. Halhin-Gol at Onomonhan Summerfall 1939. Soviet-Japanese border war in Mongolia ties down the Kuomintang army and helps steer Tokyo's grand strategy south toward the Pacific, Southeast Asia, rather than northern indirect boon to China. 7. United Front dynamics behind the lines. 8th Route Army expands base areas in North China. Hubei Ma Shengxi Shonding, emphasizing guerrilla warfare, political work, and taxation reform. New 4th Army, founded 1938, operates in the lower Yangtze hinterland. Coordination with nationalist commands remains uneven, but both claim Changsha as proof the United Front can fight and win defensively. Milestones. April 1938, Taia Swang, May Shuzhou Falls. June, Yellow River Breach. June-October Wuhan Campaign. Fall. October Guangzhou captured 1938. Burma Road, opened Sept-October 1939. First Changsha Deck. 1939 January 1940 Kunlan Pass. Key figures: Li Zongren by Chongxi Zhu, Yu Du Yuming, Chiang Kai-shek, Japanese theater commanders, Soviet advisors, pilots, visual cues, Yangtze, map inset Nanjing gives Wuhan gives Chongqing, a dotted Burma Road, snaking to Kunming, air raid siren over a tunnel sheltering crowd, Changsha River line with counterattack arrows, quick take, Japan consolidated occupied China with a collaborationist regime in Nanjing Jingwei, 1940, a coastal blockade, and deepening counterinsurgency. The 100 Regiments Offensive, August-December 1940, briefly shocked Japanese rail lines, prompting harsher sweeps. Diplomatically, Tokyo signed the Tripartite Pact, Sept. 1940, moved into northern French Indochina, and pressed Britain to close the Burma Road temporarily. In 1941, the new Fourth Army Incident fractured the United Front. Japan signed a neutrality pact with the USSR, then occupied southern Indochina, triggering US-UK oil freezes, the last step before the Pacific blew open. 1. A new face in Nanjing Jingwei's regime. March 1940 gives reorganized national government RNG, proclaimed in Nanjing under Wang Jingwei, claiming Chiang's mantle but operating under Japanese oversight, statecraft of occupation, puppet ministries, police gendarmerie networks, and collaborationist elites in Nanjing, Shanghai. Peace construction propaganda promises stability while labor, grain and currency controls channel resources to the occupier. Money and markets, new puppet banks, currencies, compulsory monopolies, salt, opium suppression departments with de facto revenue rolls, and rationing gives urban shortages and black markets. 2. The 100 Regiments Offensive, August-December 1940. What it was, a coordinated 8th Route Army campaign, Pang De and others, against railways, blockhouses, and mines across Hubei. Effects: dozens of rail segments disrupted, blockhouses overrun, morale boost for CCP bases and the United Front narrative. Japanese reply: accelerated counterinsurgency, railway blockhouse belts, collective punishments, and expanding no-man's-land zones. The harsher three-alls, burn all, kill all, loot all, doctrine will crystallize later, but its methods incubate here. 3. The United Front phrase, new Fourth Army Incident, January 1941, trigger, amid mistrust and tangled orders in southern Anhui, nationalist forces encircled new Fourth Army columns. Outcome: heavy CCP losses. The unit is disbanded by Nanjing Decree, and soon reconstituted elsewhere. Political damage: the incident poisons GMD-CCP relations, narrows operational coordination, and feeds dueling propaganda, unity in name, rivalry in practice. 4. Cutting China's arteries, blockade, Burma Road, and Indochina coast and river choke. The IJN tightens the maritime blockade. River patrols squeeze Yangtze traffic. Inland garrisons seize nodal towns to cut truck corridors. Burma Road closed July-October 1940. Under Japanese pressure, Britain shuts the Loshio-Kunming route for 3 months. Reopening in October is a relief, but the message is clear: aid can be throttled. Northern Indochina, September 1940. Japan occupies Tonkin with Vichy's acquiescence, menacing the Haepong-Kunming rail and placing airfields within range of Kunming. 5. The global frame snaps into place. Tripartite Pact, September 27, 1940. Germany, Italy, Japan formalized the Axis. Tokyo claims leadership of a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. US controls 1940. Export Control Act, aviation, gasoline, and high-grade scrap restrictions bite. Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact, April 13, 1941. Both sides secure their flanks. USSRIs, Europe, Japan looks south. Southern Indochina, July 1941. Japan moves into Cochin China and major ports. Airfields a leap toward Malaya, the Dutch East Indies, and the Philippines. Oil freeze, late July 1941. The US, joined by Britain and the Netherlands, freezes Japanese assets and effectively embargoes oil, a strategic chokehold. 6. Fighting on Changsha and the Interior Front, 1941. Second Battle of Changsha, Sept. 1941. General Zhu Yu employs elastic defense and encirclement to repel a Japanese push, one of China's clearest operational wins of the Middle War. Rear area development. Chongqing expands ministries, arsenals, and underground workshops. Universities and refugee networks sustain a war society under persistent bombing. 7. society under occupation and resistance, occupied cities, ration lines, price spirals, and collaborationist policing shape daily life. Cultural production continues under censorship, films, papers, theater with mixed messages. Rural bases, CCP areas, standardize, tax-in-kind, literacy drives, and local militias. Nationalist-held interiors juggle conscription, inflation, and provincial bargains to keep armies in the field. Milestones: March 1940 RNG in Nanjing, August-December 1940 100 regiments, July-October 1940 Burma Road closed gives reopened, September 1940 Tripartite Pact, N Indochina, January 1941 New Fourth Army Incident, April 1941 Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact, July 1941 S. Indochina, Oil Freeze, September 1941 Second Changsha. Key figures: Wang Jingwei, Chiang Kai-shek, Peng Dehuai, Zhu Yu. Japanese Tojo, Hideki, Rising, Doihara, Kenji. Occupation administrators. Visual cues: puppet Nanjing seal over a ration ticket, rail map with blockhouse chains, a timeline showing Tripartite Pact, gives Indochina moves, gives oil freeze, Changsha river bends with counterattack arrows. Quick take: Pearl Harbor decks 7/8. 1941 globalized the Sino-Japanese War. Japan cut the Burma Road, captured Rangoon, and drove Allied remnants into India, Yunnan. In response, the Allies opened an aerial lifeline, the Hump, and poured Lend-Lease aid into the new China-Burma-India (CBI) theater. The Flying Tigers became legend. Madame Chiang won U.S. support, and the Cairo Conference, November 1943, pledged the return of Taiwan, Penghu, and Korean independence in due course. Yet on the ground, China bled under blockade, bombing, and a devastating Henan famine, 1942–43. 1. December 1941, the war goes global. Pearl Harbor and near-simultaneous strikes Malaya. Hong Kong, Philippines pull the US and Britain into the Pacific War. China, already at war since 1937, becomes one of the Big Four allies. With the US, UK, USSR, Hong Kong falls. December 25, 1941. Japan turns quickly toward Burma, China's last reliable sea-land supply artery. 2. Collapse in Burma. Arteries cut early 1942. Japanese forces seize Rangoon March 1942, severing seaborne access to the Burma Road. Mixed Allied contingents: Chinese 5th, 6th Armies, British Indian units conduct fighting withdrawals through jungle and monsoon. Gen. Joseph Stilwell treks out to India, vowing to return. China's imported fuel, ammo, trucks, and aircraft must now fly or crawl over mountains. 3. The Hump, an air bridge over the Himalaya, 1942–43. USAAF transport wings open the Hump route from Assam, India, to Kunming, Chongqing, a perilous chain over the world's highest terrain, plagued by weather, icing, and Japanese intercepts. Initial tonnage is meager. By 1943, it rises steadily as more C-47, C-46 aircraft, airfields, and navigation aids come online, a strategic lifeline for aviation fuel, spares, and high-value cargo. 4. Flying Tigers and the Air War American Volunteer Group, AVG. The Flying Tigers, under Claire Lee Chennault, arrive late 1941. In 1942, they defend Kunming, Rangoon, and key interior hubs with distinctive shark-mouthed P-40s. The AVG disbands mid-1942. Chennault's concept of dispersed fields, early warning, and aggressive interception carries into the U.S. 14th Air Force, 1943. Strategic aim: keep China in the war by protecting bases and cities, harassing Japanese supply lines, and staging for future Pacific strikes. 5. Lend-Lease and the CBI machine. The U.S. expands Lend-Lease for China. Aircraft, radios, trucks, artillery, medical supplies. Training pipelines open in India, for example. Ramgar for Chinese divisions, X-Force, while Y-Force in Yunnan readies for a return into Burma. Command frictions. Stilwell ground-centric clashes with Chiang Kai-shek and Chennault. Air-centric over priorities. Rebuild Chinese field armies. V's, mass air power to punish Japan and protect Chinese morale. Meanwhile, Britain's Gen. William Slim stabilizes India's front. Allied engineers break ground on the Lado-Stilwell Road to reconnect with the old Burma Road. Slow work, through jungle and mountains. 6. Occupation deepens. The home front strains. The Nanjing collaborationist regime, Wang Jingwei, tightens urban rationing and currency schemes. Black markets thrive. Japanese garrisons expand blockhouse belts in north-central China. Chongqing endures continued bombing, pushing ministries, arsenals, and schools further underground. Catastrophe in the interior. The Henan famine, 1942–43, from drought, locusts, war disruption, and policy failures kills and displaces large numbers, draining the nationalist state's legitimacy in key provinces. 7. Politics and diplomacy. Winning friends while holding lines. Madame Chiang Kai-shek Song Mei-ling tours the U.S. early 1943, addresses Congress, and galvanizes public support for China's cause. Extraterritoriality abolished, 1943. The US and UK sign new treaties ending old, unequal privileges. Symbolic restoration of Chinese sovereignty. A morale boost amid hardship. SEAC formed late 1943. Lord Mountbatten takes Allied command in Southeast Asia, coordinating plans to reopen Burma and raise pressure on Japan's southern perimeter. 8. Cairo Conference and Allied Aims, November 1943. Roosevelt, Churchill, and Chiang meet in Cairo. The pledges restoration of Taiwan Formosa and the Pescadores Penghu to China after victory. Korea to become independent in due course. Japan stripped of conquests since 1914. Cairo confirms China's political stature, principal ally, not merely a victim, while committing the Allies to an eventual northern Burma offensive to reopen land supply. What 1941–43 changed strategic geometry. China survives as a major Allied base area, despite the loss of Burma, thanks to air supply and land. Operational balance. Japanese armies sit on vast occupied zones, but face logistical drag and an air threat growing from inland bases. Political trajectory. Cairo and the end of extraterritoriality re-legitimize China abroad. At home, famine, inflation, and corruption erode nationalist support. Fault lines that will matter later. Milestones. Dec 7/8, 1941, Pearl Harbor. U.S. enters war. December 25, 1941, Hong Kong falls. March 1942, Rangoon lost. Burma Road cut. 1942, Hump opens. Lado Road begins. February 1943, Madame Chiang in U.S. 1943. Extraterritoriality ended by US-UK, November 1943, Cairo Conference. Key figures: Chiang Kai-shek, Song Mei-ling, Claire Lee Chennault, Joseph Stilwell, William Slim, Lord Mountbatten, Japanese theatre commanders, and occupation authorities. Visual cues: a dotted humpback over the Himalaya, shark-mouth P-40 nose art. Lado Road, bulldozers in jungle. A Cairo group photo with a caption strip of the pledges. Quick take: Japan's Operation Ichigo, April–December 1944, smashed through Hunan-Nangguangsi, seizing the north-south rail spine and many U.S. 14th Air Force bases in China. Even as the front reeled, Allied forces retook northern Burma, finished the Lado-Stilwell Road, and ramped up the Hump airlift. In 1945, Chinese armies checked Japan in West Hunan, and in August the Soviet offensive in Manchuria plus the atomic bombs forced Tokyo's capitulation. China emerged victorious but exhausted and headed towards civil war. 1. Operation Ichigo. Why and how? April–December 1944. Objectives: destroy U.S. airfields in east-central China that hosted B-29 staging and 14th AF raids. Open a continuous rail corridor from Beijing, Tianjin through Wuhanchang, Shaguilin, Luzhou down to Indochina. Easing Japan's logistics. Phase I Henan, April–May. Japanese spearheads rupture the front. Take Luoyang, wrecking the Yellow River Defense Scheme. Phase II, Hunan, June–August. Changsha falls after earlier Chinese victories there. Hengyang holds for weeks under siege before capitulating, inflicting heavy Japanese losses but yielding a key node. Phase III, Guangxi Septek, Guilin-Liuzhou collapse. The corridor links to Indochina, Wuzhou, Nanning sector, isolating many interior bases. Consequences: vast refugee flows, severe inflation, and a blow to nationalist morale. Japan gains ground but overextends garrisons and supply. 2. The Burma turnaround, roads and air, 1944, early 1945. Northern Burma campaign, Chinese NCAC, and Allied forces capture Mutsina, August 3, 1944. After a grueling siege, Japanese positions unravel in the Hukong-Mogong valleys. Lado gives Stilwell Road. Engineers punch the Lado Road through jungle and mountains, joining the old Burma Road. First truck convoy reaches Kunming February 4, 1945. The Hump soars. Monthly tonnage climbs through 1944 to 45. Flying fuel parts that keep China's air war alive even before the road opens. Command shuffle. Frictions culminate in Gen. Joseph Stilwell's recall. October 1944. Albert Weddermere takes over U.S. forces in China. Chennault's air strategy regains priority for defense and interdiction. British 14th Army. In central Burma, Slim smashes Japanese forces Mktila, Mandalay. Mark Mew in 1945 securing the wider reopening of the Burma route. 3. China's 1945 campaigns. Holding and countering. Battle of West Hunan Xiangxi. Zhejiang, APR June 1945. Japanese attempts to disrupt Allied air bases and the new supply lines are repulsed. Zuyu and other nationalist commanders execute elastic defense and counterblow. Reforms and training. Select Chinese divisions trained, equipped under U.S. programs field better signals, artillery, and logistics, improving performance despite nationwide strain. Guerrilla pressure. CCP base areas expand sabotage and taxation systems behind Japanese lines. Nationalist-communist coordination remains tense but functional in places where U.S. air supply demands security. 4. August 1945. 3 shocks end the war. 6 August, Hiroshima bomb. The 9th of August, Soviet August storm into Manchuria. Massive mechanized blitz over the Greater Khingan breaks the Kwantung Army in days. Pui is captured attempting to flee. The 9th of August, Nagasaki bomb. The 15th of August, Emperor Hirohito broadcasts surrender. Chinese fronts receive ceasefire orders. 5. China's victory ceremonies and restorations. September 9, 1945, Nanjing. Gen. He Yinkin accepts the Japanese surrender for the China Theater. Taiwan Penghu. Administration transferred to the Republic of China. Ceremony, October 25, 1945. Aligning with Allied statements at Cairo. Demobilization and repatriation. Millions of Japanese soldiers, civilians begin return. Rail hubs and ports strain under the logistics of handover and relief. 6. What Ichigo and August storm really changed. Ichigo's paradox. Japan seized a giant corridor but bled out garrisons, and transport could take, not digest. China's interior state survived, anchored by air supply and Lado-Burma roads. Soviet offensive. The destruction of the Kwantung Army removed Japan's northern shield and reshaped the post-war balance in Manchuria, where arsenals, rails, and depots became prizes in the looming Chinese Civil War. 7. Aftermath. Winning the war, losing the peace. State exhaustion, hyperinflation, famine, aftershocks, and warlord-style local bargains erode nationalist authority. Power vacuum in the northeast. Competing forces rush to occupy Manchuria. Captured Japanese and factories become decisive stakes, from United Front to Civil War. By 1946, truces falter. Full-scale GM-DCCP conflict resumes, culminating in a new political map by 1949. Milestones. APR December 1944, Operation Ichigo. August 3, 1944, Muchina. February 4, 1945. First Stilwell Road convoy to Kunming. March 1945. Mandalay Mktila retaken. APR June 1945. West Hunan defense. August 6 and 9. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. August 9. Soviets into Manchuria. August 15. Japan announces surrender. Sept 9. China theater surrender. Nanjing, October 25. Taiwan administration transferred. Key figures. Chiang Kai-shek, He Yinkin, Albert Weddermere, Claire Lee Chennault, Joseph Stilwell earlier. Japanese theater commanders. P.Y. Soviet Vasilevsky, Malinovsky, Manchuria. Visual cues. Corridor map of Ichigo Luyong gives Changsha. Hengyang gives Guilin. Liuzhou gives Indochina. A dotted hump arc plus Stilwell Road line. A calendar strip for August 6 to 15th. Surrender table in Nanjing. Series close. From the Mukden Blast 1931 to Nanjing's surrender table 1945. Japan's advanced road rails and treaties and ended under air power, industrial attrition, and Soviet armor. China endured that terrible cost and stepped from one war straight into another.